A tiny girl no older than 8, standing alone in a storm of white, her bare feet sink into the freezing snow, her red dress torn by branches, her breath trembling like a frightened bird. Behind her, the dark forest looms, silent, watching, as if even the trees know something terrible is coming. She turns back once, as if listening for someone she loves. Then she runs with everything she has left. Because somewhere in that darkness, her little brother is crying, and she is the only one brave enough to look for help. But who is she running from? And who will she find out there in the frozen wild? Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from today? And wherever you are, I hope your day is peaceful, warm, and filled with good things. Winter settled over Silver Pine, Montana, like a heavy, uninvited guest, draping the mountains and valleys in blankets of white that seemed to swallow sound itself. This part of northern Montana, far from the interstates and cell towers, had a kind of silence that felt older than time, sharp, biting, and sacred in its stillness. Snow fell in slow spirals, catching the faint glow from the cabin windows scattered among the trees. Temperatures had dropped below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The air was so crisp that each breath felt like inhaling shattered crystal. It was the kind of night when even the wind seemed too cold to bother howling. In a small wooden cabin on the edge of the Silver Pine National Forest, Officer Grant Holloway sat alone at his desk, reviewing paperwork illuminated by a single desk lamp. Grant was 38 years old, standing at 6'1", with broad shoulders built from years of physical work rather than gym vanity. His short, dark brown hair was streaked with the first hints of gray, especially by the temples, giving him a quiet, worn gravity. Deep-set hazel eyes often gave him a distant look, as though he was perpetually sorting through memories he didn't quite want to revisit. His jawline was marked with an old scar, thin but pronounced, running from the corner of his chin toward his left ear, a souvenir from a domestic violence call that went wrong years ago. Grant wasn't the type to brag about it. He didn't brag about anything. Pain, in all its forms, had shaped him more than triumph ever did. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, Grant learned early that the world could be harsh, but people could choose not to be. At 22, he joined the police academy with an idealism that many of his colleagues would eventually lose. But Grant held on to it, as stubbornly as he held on to the memory of his younger sister, Emily Holloway, who had died at 14 in a violent incident caused by her stepfather, an act of cruelty that Grant arrived too late to prevent. That loss had carved something deep in him, a vow, silent but fierce, to never again abandon a child to the shadows. Near the fireplace, lying on a woven rug, was Kane, his 4-year-old German shepherd. Kane had the classic black and tan coat, typical of his breed, with a proud, angular face, intelligent amber eyes, and perked ears that twitched at even the faintest noise. His muscles rippled under his fur whenever he shifted. He was bred for working and trained for search and rescue, though Grant insisted he also had a soft side, something Kane only showed when no one else was watching. Kane was fiercely loyal, protective, and almost unnervingly perceptive. Sometimes Grant wondered if the dog could sense the ghosts he carried inside him. Outside, the snow continued falling, soft but steady. The stove crackled. The cabin smelled of cedar wood, coffee grounds, and the faint metallic scent of melted snow on boots near the door. Grant leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. It had been a long week, a missing hunter found half frozen by the creek, a domestic dispute in town that left a young mother bruised, and a long report he still wasn't finished with. Kane suddenly lifted his head. Grant stiffened. He trusted Kane more than any alarm system. "What is it, boy?" Kane didn't bark. He listened. A stillness fell over him, ears rigid, throat tight. And then it came. A scream, faint at first, as if swallowed by the snow. A child's scream. Grant shot to his feet, chair scraping the wooden floor. The scream rose again, clearer this time, echoing through the tree line. "Help! They're hurting my brother!" Grant felt his pulse spike. He grabbed his winter coat, swiped his flashlight from the hook near the door, and signaled Kane with a quick motion. The dog bounded forward immediately, muscles coiling with alertness. The two burst into the freezing night, breath turning to vapor in the icy air. Snow fell harder now, thick flakes turning the forest into a blur of white silhouettes. The beam of Grant's flashlight cut through the dark, but visibility was still limited. Another scream. "Please! Someone help!" This voice, higher, cracking with terror, belonged to a little girl. Grant pushed through the drifts, Kane sprinting ahead, but staying within sight. His boots punched through the fresh snow, sending powder splashing upward. Branches sagged with ice, brushing his coat as he ran. From behind a thicket of snow-laden bushes, a small figure stumbled into view. A little girl, no older than 8, burst out of the trees, nearly falling forward from sheer exhaustion. She wore a torn red cotton dress that was far too thin for the weather, her arms bare and scraped. Her long, golden-brown hair was plastered to her face by snow and tears. Her legs were trembling violently, and her bare feet were raw and bleeding, leaving red spots where they touched the snow. Grant knelt immediately, lowering himself to her level so he wouldn't tower over her. Hey, I'm a police officer. You're safe now. What's your name?" The girl gulped air, chest heaving. Ellie Porter." Her voice was hoarse. She clutched her arms around herself as if trying to keep her bones from shaking apart. Grant gently placed his coat around her small shoulders. She flinched at first, reacting to sudden touch as if expecting pain, then relaxed when she realized he meant no harm. Kane approached slowly, lowering his head, sniffing her hand. Ellie blinked at him, then whispered, "He won't hurt me?" Grant shook his head. Kane protects kids, always. Ellie's bottom lip quivered. She placed a hand on Kane's neck. The dog leaned into her touch, letting out a soft rumble that was more comfort than growl. "What happened?" Grant asked softly, keeping his voice steady. Ellie's face twisted with desperation. "My brother, Benji, he's 5. They're hitting him again. They said tonight they'll make him shut up for good." Her voice broke. Please come. You have to help him." Grant didn't need more. The old wound in him, the memory of Emily, flared like a reopened scar. "Take me to him," he said. "Right now." Ellie nodded fiercely, wiping tears with the back of her hand. She took his gloved fingers in her small, freezing ones. "Follow me," she whispered. Before they moved, Grant studied her briefly. Ellie was a child, shaped by hardship. Her small frame suggested she had not been eating enough. The hollowness under her eyes hinted at nights spent awake in fear. She had the instinctive flinch of someone used to cruelty. And yet, in her gaze, there was stubborn courage, the kind that shouldn't belong to someone her age, but somehow did. They plunged into the forest again, Ellie leading them down a narrow path, half buried under snow. The trees loomed like giants, their branches hissing softly as snowflakes brushed against needles. A cold wind swept in from the north, slicing through the trees and rattling the ice. Grant scanned the surroundings with trained alertness, every sense sharpened. Kane moved ahead of them, nose twitching, tail straight, ready to signal danger at any second. "Who's hurting your brother?" Grant asked as they hurried through the forest. Ellie swallowed tightly. "Carl and Nancy Doyle. They're our foster parents." She paused, voice dropping. "But they're not like real parents. They drink and shout. And Carl says nobody cares about us, that nobody will ever help because we're nothing." Grant's jaw clenched. He was wrong. Ellie looked up at him, a mix of fear and fragile hope flickering in her eyes. "You really came. You heard me and you came. I'll always come when a kid calls for help," Grant said simply. She squeezed his hand a little tighter. Lights appeared in the distance, a sickly yellow glow through the trees. "That's their house," Ellie whispered. It looked less like a home and more like something decaying from the inside out. The siding was rotting, the porch sagged sideways, and a single flickering bulb cast eerie shadows across the snow. Kane growled low. Grant exhaled slowly, his breath fogging out in a plume. "Stay behind me." Ellie nodded, trembling violently now, not from the cold, but from dread. Grant approached the house cautiously. Through the dirty window, shapes moved. A man's shadow raised an arm. The sharp crack of something hitting flesh reached them through the walls. Ellie flinched. "Benji!" Grant's face hardened. He stepped onto the porch. Kane lowered his body, muscles coiled like a spring. Grant's hand moved toward the doorknob. This was no longer a rescue. This was a race against time, and he refused to lose another child. He kicked the door open. The front door slammed against the wall as Officer Grant Holloway burst into the rotting house, Kane charging in beside him with a deep warning growl that echoed through the narrow hallway. The interior smelled of stale alcohol, burnt grease, and something Grant immediately recognized from too many crime scenes. Fear soaked into the walls. Dim yellow light flickered overhead, casting shadows that made the whole place feel like it was shrinking inward. Ellie clutched the doorframe behind him, her breath shaking clouds of white mist in the freezing air as snow drifted inside. "Benji," she whispered. Grant's eyes swept the room. The kitchen stretched ahead, cluttered with half-empty beer bottles and takeout containers. Cabinets hung crookedly, one door barely attached. A dirty mattress lay on the floor where a dining table used to be. And in the middle of the kitchen stood Carl Doyle, the foster father, though nothing about him resembled any father Grant recognized. Carl was in his mid-40s, heavy-set with a thick neck and a bloated stomach that strained against a stained undershirt. His graying hair stuck out in greasy tufts, and his eyes, small, bloodshot, and mean, carried that familiar combination of alcohol and resentment. People like Carl didn't get mean overnight. Cruelty was his comfort zone. Grant suspected long years of unemployment, petty charges, and a temper that grew each time he didn't get his way. A leather belt hung from his right hand, and at his feet, curled up like a wounded animal, was Benji Porter, a tiny 5-year-old boy with dark blonde hair and eyes swollen from crying. His cheek was bruised purple, his bottom lip split. Kane placed himself in front of the boy instantly, teeth bared, hackles raised. Carl staggered back. "What the hell? You can't just break in here." His words slurred, breath thick with alcohol. "I got rights." "Not when a child's screaming for help," Grant said, voice low and controlled. "Step away from him, now." Carl opened his mouth, but Kane's growl rose another octave, deeper, sharper, the kind that rattled bone. Carl dropped the belt. "Nancy!" he shouted toward the back room. "Get out here!" A second later, Nancy Doyle appeared in the hallway. She was around 40, tall but slouched, with stringy brown hair that looked unwashed for days. Her face was drawn and tired, lines etched deep around her mouth. Unlike Carl's explosive anger, Nancy carried a kind of defeated bitterness. Years of living with a man like Carl had carved resignation into her bones. She hugged a faded sweater around herself and spoke without meeting Grant's eyes. "We were just disciplining the boy. Kids like him don't listen otherwise." Grant felt something cold twist inside his chest. "Discipline isn't assault. Get against the wall, both of you." "You can't tell me," Carl started, but Grant moved a step forward and the look in his eyes, controlled, fire, made Carl freeze. Kane barked once, sharp and decisive. That sealed it. Carl raised his hands, backing against the wall. Nancy followed, trembling, hands tight at her sides. Grant quickly swept the room, making sure no one else was hiding. Aside from the squalor, there wasn't much to see, just evidence of neglect, moldy dishes, broken furniture, trash bags stuffed and forgotten. The only sign children lived here were 2 small blankets on the floor and a cracked plastic bowl. Grant knelt beside Benji. The boy flinched at first, instinctively curling into himself. "Easy," Grant whispered. "I'm here to help." Kane nuzzled Benji's side gently, and the boy relaxed just enough for Grant to assess him. Bruised ribs, possible sprain in the right wrist, severe cold exposure. Not life-threatening yet, but trauma like this did not need time to kill something inside a child. Ellie rushed to Benji's side and wrapped her arms around him, tears streaming down her reddened cheeks. "I'm here, Benji. I'm here." Benji sobbed into her shoulder. Grant's jaw tightened. He pulled out his radio, then winced as static crackled through the speaker. The snowstorm had grown worse. The signal was patchy in the forest outskirts. He tried again, raising his voice. "Dispatch, this is Holloway at the Doyle residence. I need immediate..." Static. Kane's ears twitched. Grant tried a third time before giving up. The blizzard was cutting them off. "We'll take them back to my cabin," Grant said. "It's closer than the station right now. Once the storm eases, backup will reach us." Ellie trembled. "But will they come after us?" Grant looked at Carl. Carl glared back, lips curling into a venomous smile. You think you're fixing something? You don't know the half of it. Nancy looked like she wanted to say something, something hesitant, fragile, but Carl silenced her with a single glare. Grant stepped closer. What don't I know? Carl smirked, drunken confidence returning. People want those kids gone. That land their parents owned is worth more than you can imagine. Some folks don't want loose ends. Ellie tightened her grip on Benji. Grant's stomach dropped, so it was bigger than simple foster abuse. But he wasn't getting answers from Carl tonight. Turn around, hands behind your back. Grant cuffed Carl first, tight. Nancy didn't resist. She simply offered her wrists, her eyes hollow. Kane stayed between the Doyles and the children like a living shield. Snow whipped into the doorway again, stinging Grant's face. Let's move. Ellie, take Benji. Stay close to Kane. As they stepped outside, a tall, thin figure appeared at the edge of the yard, nearly hidden in the snowfall. Grant stiffened. Who's there? The figure flinched and stepped forward, revealing Mrs. Harriet Lorne, a local neighbor. Harriet was in her late 70s, a frail woman wrapped in a thick wool coat, carrying an old lantern. Her hair was white and braided, tucked under a knitted hat. Despite her age, her eyes were sharp, observant, and filled with a lifetime's worth of instincts. She lived alone at the edge of the forest and was known in town as a woman who saw things others overlooked. She approached slowly. Officer Holloway, I heard yelling, saw your flashlight. Is everything all right? Grant gave her a quick once-over. Harriet was gentle, soft-spoken, but nobody crossed her. She was the type who had survived loss after loss and somehow kept her kindness intact. Kids are safe now, Grant said. Doyles are in custody. I'll need you back inside, Mrs. Lorne. Storm's getting worse. Harriet nodded, stepping aside. But before doing so, she bent down to Benji's level. You're safe now, sweetheart. You hold tight to your sister. Benji didn't speak, but his small hand tightened around Ellie's sleeve. Grant led everyone toward his SUV, helping Ellie and Benji inside the back seat. Kane jumped in after them, settling beside the children as if he'd appointed himself their guardian. Harriet called out behind them. Officer, be careful tonight. This storm's hiding more than snow. Grant didn't have time to ask what she meant. He secured the Doyles in the trunk partition, then got into the driver's seat. The engine rumbled to life. As they pulled onto the narrow forest road, the headlights illuminated the snow swirling violently in the darkness, forming a wall of white. Ellie whispered, Grant, will we be safe at your cabin? Grant looked at her in the mirror. You will be, I promise. Kane placed his head gently on Benji's lap, and for the first time, the boy squeezed Kane's fur without fear. But as they drove deeper into the storm, Grant couldn't shake the feeling that Harriet was right. Something else was watching from the trees, and tonight was only the beginning. The SUV rumbled cautiously along the narrow forest road as the storm thickened, snowflakes slashing sideways like silver needles under the headlights. Officer Grant Holloway kept his hands firm on the steering wheel, his gaze cutting back and forth between the blinding white ahead and the rearview mirror, where Ellie and Benji huddled beneath a thick blanket. Kane sat pressed against them, his large frame steady and reassuring. Grant's cabin was still a good 15 minutes away, longer with the storm, and the swirling snow made the world look like an endless tunnel of white. Every few seconds, the wind shoved the SUV sideways, and Grant fought to keep control. Ellie broke the silence softly. Grant, are Carl and Nancy going to come after us? He glanced at her reflection. No, they're in custody. They can't hurt you now. She nodded, but doubt flickered across her eyes. Benji clung to Kane's fur silently. Grant reached forward and adjusted the heater, sending a warmer current toward the kids. The cabin lights on the dashboard flickered for a moment. The storm was gnawing at power lines already. We'll be at my cabin soon, Grant said. You'll get warm, you'll get food, and then we'll make sure the sheriff takes care of everything. Which sheriff? Ellie asked, voice trembling. Grant hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. Silver Pine's sheriff, Sheriff Donover, was a man in his late 50s, tall but frail-looking, with thinning gray hair and a limp from an old accident. He'd served the town for decades, but his judgment had grown cloudy in recent years. Rumors circulated that he'd been accepting favors, maybe even bribes, though nothing concrete had been proven. Grant didn't entirely trust him. But the kids didn't need that truth tonight. The sheriff's office, Grant said simply. We'll handle it. A sudden shape darted out from the trees, and Grant slammed the brakes, tires skidding across the icy road. Ellie gasped. Kane lunged forward, barking sharply. Grant's heart thundered as the shape stumbled into the beam of the headlights. A woman, disheveled, soaked in snow, clutching her coat tight around her, Grant's brow furrowed. Who the... She blinked at the light, raising a trembling hand. Grant lowered his window slightly. Ma'am, are you all right? The woman stepped closer. She had sandy blonde hair and a loose bun, strands frozen to her cheeks. She wore a forest green coat that had seen better days. She looked mid-30s, though exhaustion made her appear older. Her eyes, an icy blue, had a haunted sharpness to them. Please, she said, voice cracked. Are you Officer Holloway? Yes. She let out a shaking breath. Thank God. I'm Sarah Whitlock. Grant recognized the name. Sarah worked part-time at the small-town clinic, helping the elderly and running errands for patients. Quiet, soft-spoken, often overlooked. She'd survived a rough divorce 3 years ago. Her husband had been controlling and violent, leaving her skittish but resilient. Grant had seen her volunteering at town fundraisers, always attentive to others but never making eye contact too long, as if afraid to be seen. Tonight she was trembling not from cold alone. I live half a mile east, Sarah said. My lights went out. Then I heard yelling, thought someone was hurt. She hesitated as she saw Ellie and Benji inside the SUV. Oh dear, are those the Porter kids? Ellie shrank slightly, pulling the blanket up. Sarah's expression softened instantly. Sweetheart, I'm not here to hurt you. Her voice was gentle, maternal, in a way that eased the air. Grant made a quick decision. Sarah, it's dangerous out here. Get in. We're heading to my cabin. Sarah nodded gratefully and moved around to the passenger side. Snow whipped her coat as she climbed in, shaking violently from the cold. Thank you, she whispered. Grant started the engine again, easing the vehicle forward. What made you walk out in this storm? He asked. The power went out. Then, I thought I saw someone outside my house. A man, watching. But when I opened the curtain again, he was gone. Grant's jaw tightened. Could you describe him? Sarah swallowed. Tall, heavy jacket, couldn't see his face, but... She paused, struggling with the memory. He had this strange way of standing, like he was guarding something instead of hiding. Ellie tensed. Carl said people wanted us gone. Carl says a lot of things, Grant replied evenly, but his pulse quickened. Sarah pointed toward the road ahead. Look! Grant braked again. Fresh footprints in the snow crossed the road. 2 sets, leading deeper into the woods. They were recent. Less than 20 minutes old. Are those Carl's men? Ellie whispered. He doesn't have men, Grant said carefully. But the footprints told a different story. Someone had been following the Porter children. Sarah leaned closer, eyebrows knitting. Do you think they were heading toward your cabin? Grant didn't answer. Instead, he pressed his foot to the gas. Snow hammered the windshield harder than before. The SUV crawled uphill through twisting pines until Grant's cabin came into view. A sturdy wooden structure, dim lights flickering through the windows. As he parked, Kane bolted out the moment the door opened, sprinting toward the cabin with sharp barks. Something was off. Stay in the car, Grant ordered the others. He moved toward the porch, hand resting on his holster, boots crunching in the snow. Kane sniffed the ground near the steps, circling, tail stiff. Grant spotted it instantly. Boot prints around the cabin. 3 sets this time. They had walked around the house, maybe more than once. Someone was here, Grant muttered. Sarah, still inside the SUV, covered her mouth. Ellie pulled Benji closer. Grant drew his. Flashlight, scanning the windows. Nothing broken. Door still locked. Good. He unlocked the cabin slowly and entered. Everything was cold but untouched. No drawers opened, no signs of a break-in. Yet the presence lingered, like a shadow that refused to fade. Kane padded around, nose to the floor. He stopped near the fireplace and growled. Grant crouched. A small piece of paper had been tucked under the stone ledge. He unfolded it. You should have left them where they belong. His stomach clenched. Sarah stepped inside quietly. What is that? Grant showed her the note, Fear flickered across her face. "Grant, they're being hunted." "Not tonight," he said firmly. He set the note aside. "Tonight they're safe." As he got the children inside, Benji collapsed into the armchair closest to the fire. Ellie knelt beside him. Sarah removed her wet coat, revealing a simple gray sweater, her hands still shaking. Grant handed her a blanket. "Warm up. I need to get the generator running." She nodded. "Be careful." Outside, the storm roared. Grant trudged through the deepening snow toward the generator shed behind the cabin. The structure was small, just wood and metal, but sturdy enough. He unlatched the door and stepped inside. The cold air inside bit even sharper. He knelt beside the generator and froze. The fuel line had been cut. Clean. Precise. Someone had disabled it minutes ago. Kane barked wildly from the porch. Grant spun around. A shadow moved near the tree line. Tall, heavy jacket. Watching. Grant sprinted toward the porch, drawing his gun. "Stop!" The figure bolted into the woods, swallowed by the blizzard. Grant didn't pursue, not with the kids and Sarah inside. Kane growled at the forest, muscles trembling with adrenaline. Grant placed a hand on the dog's fur. "We'll deal with them later. Tonight we protect the cabin." Inside, Sarah had wrapped Ellie and Benji in blankets and was whispering gentle reassurances. Her voice held warm steadiness, a contrast to the storm outside. Ellie looked up at Grant. "Are we safe?" Grant locked the door behind him. "We will be." The wind howled like a living creature outside the cabin, slamming snow against the windows. Grant checked the locks twice. Kane settled near the children, alert, ears perked. Sarah whispered, "Whoever is after them, they're not stopping." Grant nodded. "Then neither will I." The storm thickened until the world outside the cabin vanished completely, swallowed by white chaos and whistling wind. The windows rattled under each gust. The wood stove crackled as Grant Holloway added another log, orange light flickering across the living room, where Ellie and Benji sat wrapped in blankets. Kane lay beside them like a stone sentinel, his black and tan coat glowing in the firelight, his amber eyes never leaving the door. Sarah Whitlock remained seated in the wooden chair closest to the hallway. She still shivered slightly beneath her blanket, though the warmth was returning to her cheeks. Her sandy blonde hair, now drying, had softened from its earlier frozen clumps. She folded her hands in her lap, hands slender, long-fingered, with faint white scars across the knuckles. Grant had noticed those scars before, years ago, when she fled her abusive marriage. Her ex-husband had been a man who controlled by destroying, breaking furniture, breaking belongings, and once, almost breaking Sarah herself. That history had carved a quiet resilience in her, a vigilance that never fully rested. Tonight, it made her sharper than most. Benji was asleep at last, head resting on Kane's flank. Ellie sat upright, staring into the fire as if afraid to blink. Grant crouched in front of her. "Ellie, we're safe for now," he said gently. "We'll get through the night, and tomorrow morning we'll go straight to someone I trust." "Who?" Ellie whispered. "A lawyer named Nora Briggs," Grant replied. "She's helped kids before. She's tough, honest, and nobody scares her." He paused. "I trained her German Shepherd back when she was still in law school." Ellie glanced at Kane. "Does she have a dog like him?" "A female shepherd," Grant said, a small smile forming despite the tension. "Her name's Echo. Smart as they come." A faint crack echoed outside, wood breaking under weight. Kane shot to his feet instantly, hackles rising. Grant raised a hand. "Everyone stay still." He crossed to the window slowly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. The storm distorted everything, but he peered deeper into the flickering darkness. Snow spiraled thickly, limiting visibility to a dozen feet. The trees swayed violently, and shadows danced among them like restless spirits. Sarah rose, moving closer. "Do you see someone?" He shook his head. "Not clearly?" Another sound, closer this time. A crunch of snow beneath boots. Ellie gasped softly, hands flying to her mouth. Benji stirred, but Kane nudged him back down gently, letting out a quiet rumble that vibrated through the floor. Grant motioned toward the hallway. "Ellie, take Benji to the back room. Sarah, go with him." Sarah hesitated only long enough to grab Benji in her arms. Ellie followed quickly, Kane hovering protectively over their retreat before returning to Grant's side. Grant extinguished the lantern, leaving the room lit only by dim firelight. Shadows thickened. His breathing slowed, every muscle sharpened. He had trained for nights like this, but never with two traumatized children sleeping in the next room. A soft knock broke through the storm. 3 taps, calculated, not frantic. Grant stepped beside the door, gun raised. "Officer Holloway," a woman's voice called. "It's Sheriff Donover. Open up." Grant froze, suspicion sliding down his spine like ice. Why would the sheriff come here, in a blizzard, without calling first? He exchanged a look with Kane. The dog's lip curled slightly, ears pinned back. Kane didn't trust the voice. Grant said nothing, listening. The voice spoke again. "Grant? You in there?" He moved silently toward the window beside the door and tilted the curtain just enough to see outside without being seen. A tall figure stood on the porch, coat hood pulled tightly, face obscured by swirling snow. Not Sheriff Donover's usual shape. The sheriff had a noticeable limp. This figure stood balanced, weight evenly distributed, almost poised. A hunter's stance. Grant lowered the curtain. "That's not him," he murmured. The knock came again, this time harder. "Open the door, officer." The tone shifted, no longer polite but irritated, impatient. Sarah whispered from the hallway, "Grant, is someone there?" He held a finger to his lips. Then, without warning, the doorknob rattled violently. The intruder was trying to force their way in. Kane lunged toward the door, growling deep and primal. The doorknob shook again. Then it stopped. Silence fell. A full 10 seconds passed. Slowly the intruder's voice drifted through the wood, low, mocking. "You should have left the kids where they were." Footsteps retreated into the snow. Not hurried, confident, purposeful. Grant waited until he heard nothing but the storm. Then he exhaled. "This is bigger than we thought," he whispered to Kane. He secured the deadbolt, added the steel bar across the door, and double-checked the windows. Sarah re-entered the living room, holding Ellie's hand. Ellie's face was pale but determined. "That wasn't the sheriff," she said. "Sheriff moves slower, and he has a cough." Grant didn't know whether to be impressed or worried that an 8-year-old noticed those things. "No," he said. "It wasn't him." Benji tugged weakly on Ellie's sleeve from behind her, half awake. "Ellie, he found us?" "No," Grant said firmly. "He didn't get inside, and he won't." Sarah stepped closer. "Grant, someone is trying to eliminate witnesses." "I know," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, I mean, this isn't sloppy. These men are trained. They watch my house. They followed you without making mistakes. They cut your generator line. Cleanly. Not ripped, not smashed. Someone with skill." Grant finally turned to her fully. "Sarah, what exactly did you see near your home?" She swallowed. "2 men, one by the old pine, one near my shed. They weren't acting like burglars. They were coordinating." She hugged herself. "I didn't tell you earlier. I was scared. But I think they were waiting for someone to come out." Grant felt a cold wave wash over him, one colder than the storm. "They were waiting for me," he said. Kane's growl deepened, vibrating like a warning drum. Ellie whispered, "Why do they want us so bad?" Grant knelt beside her, taking her small hands in his. "Because you and Benji know the truth about what happened to your parents. Because you survived something someone tried to bury." He paused. "But I promise you, no matter who is after you, they're not taking you away." Ellie nodded slowly, trying to be brave. Grant rose. "We need to strengthen the cabin. I'll seal the windows. Add another lock to the back door. Sarah, help Ellie and Benji gather what they need." Sarah nodded, already moving. As Grant hammered a metal bracket into the kitchen window frame, Kane suddenly stiffened. The dog bolted toward the back of the cabin, snarling. Grant hurried after him. At the back wall, near the small storage door, Kane pawed the floor urgently. Grant crouched and lifted a loose floorboard, one he hadn't used in years. Underneath lay something he had forgotten existed, a small metal lockbox. Grant opened it slowly. Inside were old documents, a badge, and a flash drive. Relics from a corruption investigation he had once started against a land developer. An investigation shut down by Sheriff Donover himself. The name stamped on the folder made Grant's heart stop. Meridian Development Group. The same company rumored to be circling the Porterland. Ellie and Benji weren't just targets. They were the last loose ends to a crime years in the making. Grant closed the box quietly. Ellie stood behind him, eyes wide. "Grant, what is that?" He looked at her, voice soft but resolute. "The reason someone wants your family gone." Kane pressed against Grant's side, protective and ready. Grant felt the storm's howl grow louder outside. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight, survival was enough. By the time the storm finally began to ease, the sky outside the cabin had shifted from pitch black to a bruised gray. The snow fell softer now, settling into thick, silent blankets over the forest. The wind no longer howled. Instead, it whispered along the eaves, as if exhausted from its violent night. Grant Holloway hadn't slept at all. He stood by the living room window, watching the first weak light seep through the clouds. His breath fogged the glass slightly. Every once in a while, he checked the snow around the porch for footprints. None fresh. Whoever had stood there last night had vanished into the trees and the blizzard alike. Kane lay at Grant's feet, still alert, though his eyelids drooped with fatigue. He was 4 years old, a working-line German shepherd trained to push through exhaustion. But even he needed rest. His fur was dusted with flakes from repeatedly checking the edges of the cabin. Still, his amber eyes tracked every sound. The shift of the roof timber, the crunch of snow sliding off the eaves, Ellie's soft breathing from the couch. Ellie had finally fallen asleep at dawn, curled protectively around Benji. Her golden brown hair spilled across her brother's shoulder. Benji, still trembling occasionally from pain and fear, slept with his hand wrapped tightly in Kane's fur, unwilling to let go even in dreams. Sarah Whitlock emerged from the hallway, wrapped in Grant's extra flannel shirt. Her sandy blonde hair fell in loose waves now that it had fully dried. The warm color in her cheeks had returned, chasing away the ghostly pallor from the night before. Her blue eyes, though still tired, held clarity again, the kind sharpened by survival and fear, but not consumed by it. She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "Did you sleep at all?" Grant shook his head. "Didn't need it." "You're lying," she said softly, "and you're terrible at it." He allowed himself a faint, tired smirk. Sarah stepped to the window beside him. "Think they'll come back?" "Not in broad daylight," Grant answered. "Cowards like this move in storms and shadows. They'll wait. They'll plan." "Then we have time," she said. Grant wasn't so sure. He turned from the window and reached into the kitchen drawer for his satellite phone, the emergency backup for when the radio failed. He dialed a number he knew by heart. After 3 rings, a voice answered. Low, sharp, female. "Nora Briggs." "Nora, it's Grant." A pause. "Holloway? You never use this number unless something's wrong." "Something's very wrong." He gave her a quick rundown, discovering the Porter children, their injuries, the Doyle's threats, the intruders, the cut fuel line, the note left behind, and finally, the lockbox he found in his own floorboards linking everything to Meridian Development Group. Nora's voice sharpened like a knife. "Grant, you were supposed to hand over all materials connected to that case." "I did," he replied quietly. "Except that file was hidden by someone else, someone who wanted me out of the investigation." Another pause, longer, colder. "Where are the children now?" "Safe, for the moment." "I'm driving up. Storm's still bad. Don't care. It's dangerous. So is inaction." Grant sighed. Nora Briggs, 36, was a woman he deeply respected and occasionally feared. Petite but fierce, with sharp features and eyes like steel blue daggers, Nora carried herself like someone who had survived too many courts, too many liars, too many late nights fighting for children nobody else fought for. She dressed like a professional, but moved like a predator. Trauma had carved strength from her bones. "Be careful," Grant said. "We'll be waiting." When he hung up, Sarah was watching him with concern. "She's intense." "She's the kind of person you want on your side," Grant answered, "especially when someone's trying to bury the truth." He turned toward the kids, Ellie stirred, blinking awake. "Grant? Is it morning?" "It is," he said gently. "Are you hungry?" She shook her head. "Did the bad people come back?" "No, and they won't while it's daylight." Benji slowly lifted his head, blinking groggily. Purple bruises traced his cheek and ribs. He whispered something barely audible. "My mommy." Ellie squeezed his shoulders. "We're safe now, Benji." Grant crouched before him. "Hey, buddy, you're going to be okay, I promise." Kane nudged Benji gently, licking his hand. The small boy managed a tiny smile. After getting the children warm oatmeal and helping Sarah prepare tea, Grant put on his coat. "I'm going outside to check the property." Sarah set down the spoon she was holding. "I'm coming with you." "No," Grant said firmly. "Stay in here with them." "Grant, I'm not helpless." "I know that," he said gently. "But last night scared the kids. They need you more than they need me right now." Sarah hesitated, but when Benji grabbed her sleeve, she nodded. Grant stepped outside, Kane padding beside him. The snow reached halfway up his boots. He examined the cabin perimeter. Tracks had been blown over by the storm, but faint impressions remained, leading toward the old mining trail. Only one set. The figure from last night. Grant crouched, touching the snow. Newly hardened ice. Whoever the intruder was had waited a long time in the freezing cold. Probably wearing specialized gear, not just hired thugs, someone trained. A twig snapped behind him. Grant spun, gun raised, then lowered it immediately. A man approached from the tree line, bundled in a parka, breathing heavily. He was in his mid-30s, with curly brown hair and wire-frame glasses fogged from cold. His face was nervous, but kind. Grant recognized him at once, Dr. Malcolm Pierce, the town physician. Malcolm was awkward, in posture and manner, thin-framed with narrow shoulders and a habit of pushing his glasses up when anxious, which was often. He was brilliant, introverted, and chronically overworked. His empathy often made him take risks he shouldn't. "Grant!" he called, stumbling through the snow. "I came as soon as the clinic door unfroze. The sheriff told me you had 2 injured kids. Porter kids?" "That's right," Grant said. "How'd you find us?" "Mrs. Lorne told me you brought them to your cabin," Malcolm said. "She's worried sick, and so am I." Grant scanned Malcolm's face for hidden intent. "You came alone?" "Of course," Malcolm said, confused. "Why wouldn't I?" Kane sniffed him thoroughly. Malcolm froze, hands raised. "Is he friendly?" "If you're safe for the children, yes," Grant said. Kane approved with a soft grunt. Grant led Malcolm inside. The doctor immediately knelt beside Benji, examining his bruises with gentle, practiced care. "Poor child," Malcolm murmured. "This is abuse, no question." He checked Ellie next. Her frostbitten toes had begun to heal, but she winced as he touched the scrapes on her legs. "I'll prepare a full report," Malcolm said, "and I'll testify in court." Sarah exhaled with relief. Ellie gave him the first hopeful look she'd shown since the night began. Grant placed a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. "Thank you." Malcolm shook his head. "No child should suffer like this." As Grant stood, Kane suddenly barked sharply at the window. Everyone froze. A dark SUV crawled through the trees toward the cabin, tires crushing snow. Grant moved to the window, gun raised. Sarah whispered, "Is it them?" "No," Grant said slowly. "It's Nora." The SUV stopped. A woman stepped out, short, raven-haired, wearing a charcoal gray coat and black gloves. Her expression was sharp, jaw tight against the cold. Nora Briggs had arrived, and nothing would be the same after this. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles do not always arrive with thunder or bright lights. Sometimes they come quietly, through the courage of a child, the loyalty of a dog, or the steady hands of someone who refuses to give up. In moments when life feels heavy and the world seems cold, God often works through ordinary people who choose to show kindness when it matters most. Just like Officer Grant opening his door to 2 frightened children, we all have moments in our daily lives when we can be a light in someone else's darkness. A small act of compassion, a gentle word, a helping hand, these things are often the miracles someone has been praying for. If this story touched your heart even a little, I invite you to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what part moved you the most. And if you believe in the healing power of love and in the quiet miracles God sends into our lives, Write amen in the comments. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you and everyone you love. Stay safe, stay kind, and subscribe for more stories that warm the heart and remind us that grace still walks beside us every day.